Welcome, dear detective lovers, to a new tale from Mystery Vault. Today, we journey back to the opulent yet secrets-laden world of Finch Manor. Hercule Poirot and his faithful companion Captain Hastings find themselves embroiled in the case of the vanished valuables. When a scrupulous collector is brutally murdered and a priceless Fabergé egg disappears, initial suspicions point to a simple robbery. But Poirot's keen eye and those famous little grey cells uncover a far darker truth, a high-stakes conspiracy of government embezzlement and a devastating betrayal of trust. Prepare for a masterful whodunit where nothing is as it seems. And if you enjoy this journey into mystery, please consider subscribing, giving this video a thumbs up, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1. A Gentleman's Dilemma. Sir Alistair Finch was, by all accounts, a man carved from the finest mahogany of British tradition, solid, polished, and meticulously ordered. His reputation as a collector of rare antiquities was overshadowed only by his own scrupulous nature and a deep-seated sense of civic duty that ran as thick as the ancient blood in his veins. He possessed an almost reverential respect for provenance, not just of his prized possessions, but of truth itself. Finch Manor, his ancestral home nestled amidst rolling Kentish hills, mirrored its owner perfectly. Every book on every shelf, every painting on every wall, every precious artifact in its custom-built display case was placed with an almost surgical precision. It was a realm of hushed elegance, where the tick of a grandfather clock sounded like a pronouncement, and dust was an affront to the natural order. Among his myriad treasures, few captured the public's imagination quite like his collection of Fabergé Imperial Eggs, each a masterpiece of intricate artistry and hidden wonders. Lately, however, Sir Alistair's meticulous energies had been diverted from the acquisition of beauty to the auditing of history. His new hobby involved poring over archived government documents, a task he embraced not for leisure, but with the fervent precision of a forensic accountant. He believed in the integrity of institutions, and a recent, disquieting rumor of fiscal impropriety within a government department had pricked his conscience. He had, with his usual quiet determination, secured access to the relevant ledgers and correspondence. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of grey, blustery day that made the warmth of the library particularly inviting, when Sir Alistair's quiet hum of contentment ceased abruptly. His spectacles perched low on his nose, he traced a line of figures with a gloved finger, then traced it again. A discrepancy. Small at first. Then another, slightly larger, hidden beneath layers of innocuous entries. His brow furrowed, a silent alarm ringing in the tranquil room. "Impossible," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper against the crackle of the fire. He leaned back, his gaze fixed on the column of numbers, a growing sense of unease coiling in his gut. This was no simple error. This was a pattern, a deliberate, calculated siphoning of public funds. His grave suspicions solidified into chilling certainty. Someone, high up, was stealing. For the next 10 days, Sir Alistair Finch became a man possessed, though his quiet, methodical nature ensured no one in Finch Manor noticed his single-minded obsession. He spent hours, often late into the night, amidst a sea of ledgers and documents, his library desk becoming a battlefield where truth fought deceit. He meticulously cross-referenced, highlighted and annotated each red ink mark a tiny, damning indictment. Finally, he had it, an irrefutable summary condensed onto a single, legal-sized sheet. It was a ledger of illicit transactions, a flowchart of stolen funds, and a clear, undeniable roster of those complicit. The gravity of the document weighed heavily on him. This was not merely a case of petty theft. It implicated figures at the highest echelons of government. He couldn't risk it falling into the wrong hands, nor could he simply leave it vulnerable. He considered a safe, but his study was well known, its strongbox an obvious target. Then his gaze fell upon his most treasured possession, the Fabergé Imperial Egg, a masterpiece that sat elegantly on a rotating pedestal in a specially lit niche. Its intricate craftsmanship, its delicate enamelwork, and the miniature music box concealed within its base sparked an ingenious idea. He carefully approached the egg, his movements precise. He knew its every secret, every tiny catch and hinge. With a faint click, the delicate music box mechanism detached from the base. Within, there was a tiny, unused compartment, designed perhaps for a miniature portrait or a lock of hair, now the perfect, undetectable sanctuary for his damning evidence. He folded the document with extreme care, ensuring it lay flat and unseen. Reclasping the mechanism, he felt a momentary tremor in his hand. "There," he whispered, a sigh escaping his lips. "Safe. For now." A profound weariness settled upon him. His discovery, while validating his suspicions, brought with it a crushing burden. The implications were staggering: careers ruined, reputations shattered, public trust irrevocably broken. And among the names, a chilling thought began to form, one he desperately wished to dismiss. He knew he could not sit on this truth. It had to come out. But how, and to whom, without causing an irreversible cataclysm? The question gnawed at him, overshadowing even the satisfaction of his meticulous audit. Among Sir Alistair's closest confidants, few held a position as esteemed as the Duke of Ashworth. Their friendship spanned decades, forged in the crucible of public school where they shared scrapes and whispered secrets, solidified through shared experiences at university where they debated philosophy and dreamt of futures, and deepened by years of mutual respect in parliamentary circles. The Duke, a distinguished member of Parliament with an unblemished record and a formidable presence in the House of Lords, was the epitome of the public servant Sir Alistair admired and believed in. It was precisely this deep-seated admiration, this profound personal history, that made the insidious possibility of the Duke's involvement in the embezzlement so agonizing. The very idea felt like a betrayal of everything Sir Alistair held dear. Sir Alistair had scrutinized the damning document countless times, his mind racing through the implications with a frantic energy that belied his calm exterior. Could Arthur, his dear friend, truly be entangled in such a web of deceit? He wrestled with the idea, dismissing it as quickly as it arose, then allowing it to resurface with renewed dread. The evidence was compelling, but his heart resisted. His loyalty demanded a private confrontation first, a chance for the Duke to explain away the damning figures, to perhaps even deny it convincingly and restore Sir Alistair's shattered faith. He couldn't bear the thought of exposing his friend, of ruining a man he had respected for so long without first offering him this desperate opportunity for a quiet rectification. The potential fallout, both personal and public, was immense. With a heavy heart, he penned a formal, yet subtly urgent, invitation. "My dear Arthur," it read, penned in Sir Alistair's precise hand, "I find myself in need of your esteemed counsel on a delicate matter, and would be delighted if you could join me at Finch Manor this coming weekend. A quiet weekend of discussion, perhaps a game of chess, by the fire, an excellent company. Do let me know your availability. Your wisdom is much needed." The delicate matter was, of course, the corruption, but disguised as an innocuous request for advice on a rare, recently acquired manuscript. It was a hopeful gesture, a last, fragile attempt to preserve a cherished bond before the inevitable, crushing truth. Coincidentally, or perhaps, as Poirot would later reflect, by Sir Alistair's own subtle, brilliant orchestration, the esteemed Belgian detective Hercule Poirot and his faithful companion, Captain Hastings, were also due to arrive that very Friday. Sir Alistair had extended an invitation weeks prior under the pretext of seeking Poirot's unparalleled eye for a minor consultation on the authenticity of a newly acquired Roman mosaic fragment. It was a clever decoy, providing a perfectly plausible, innocent reason for the celebrated detective's presence, should his services suddenly become more urgently required, transforming from art consultant to criminal investigator in a blink. "Ah, Hastings," Poirot had mused in their London flat, adjusting a perfectly straight boutonniere on his lapel. Another rural excursion. One hopes Sir Alistair's mosaic is genuinely puzzling, rather than merely a pretext for his excellent Earl Grey tea and tranquil country air. He gave a small, contented sigh. Hastings, ever practical, had replied, "Well, at least it's a pleasant drive, Poirot. And Finch Manor is rather magnificent, if a bit quiet for my taste." Little did they know the quietude of Finch Manor, and indeed the tranquillity of a nation, was about to be irrevocably shattered. Hercule Poirot, stepping from the motor car onto the gravel drive of Finch Manor, paused, drawing a deep, almost theatrical breath of the crisp country air. His eyes, however, were not admiring the manicured lawns or the impressive facade of the house. They were scanning, absorbing, taking note of the almost imperceptible vibrations in the atmosphere. "Mon ami Hastings," he murmured, his gaze lingering on a window where a curtain twitched almost imperceptibly. "Do you not feel it? A certain tightness in the air, no?" Hastings, still retrieving his modest valise, frowned. "Tightness? Poirot, it's a perfectly lovely country estate. A bit grand, perhaps, but certainly not tight, unless you mean the weather's closing in." Poirot merely hummed, a soft, knowing sound. Inside the grand hall, the reception was warm, almost too warm. Lady Eleanor Finch, a woman of brittle elegance, greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her son Reggie Finch, a restless young man with an expensive suit and a perpetually worried frown, hovered awkwardly. Madame Dubois, Sir Alistair's fastidious art curator, offered a curt professional nod, her gaze sharp and assessing. Mr. Silas Blackwood, the Manor's chief of security, was a silent, imposing figure in the background, his eyes constantly moving. Even the seemingly unflappable Miss Beatrice Plum, Sir Alistair's personal assistant, exhibited a fractional hesitation when offering tea, a blink-and-you-miss-it waiver in her usual precise demeanour. "Everyone is so dreadfully polite," Poirot remarked to Hastings later, as they settled into their appointed rooms. Like actors on a stage, each playing their part with admirable, if slightly exaggerated, dedication. "Just good manners, Poirot," Hastings countered, stretching out on the comfortable armchair. "You always look for hidden meanings in everything." "It is my métier, Hastings," Poirot replied, adjusting a cushion to a perfectly symmetrical angle. "And here I sense a hidden meaning like a loose thread in a precisely woven tapestry." The evening brought the arrival of the Duke of Ashworth, his imposing figure filling the doorway. His greeting of Sir Alistair was effusive, yet Poirot observed the subtle tremor in Sir Alistair's hand as he clapped the Duke on the shoulder. Throughout dinner, Sir Alistair, usually the picture of composed geniality, seemed unusually distracted. He picked at his food, his answers to casual inquiries, slightly off-kilter, his gaze repeatedly, almost involuntarily, darting towards the Duke, then away. A strained silence occasionally descended, broken only by Lady Eleanor's efforts to keep the conversation flowing. The mosaic consultation seemed forgotten. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, an undercurrent that Poirot felt humming beneath his very skin. Hastings, though less attuned, did notice Sir Alistair's paleness, and attributed it to a late night or perhaps a touch of indigestion. But Poirot knew better. This was the agitation of a man holding a volatile secret, poised on the brink of revelation. Chapter 2. The Unthinkable Act. The heavy oak door of Sir Alistair's study closed with a soft thud, muffling the distant sounds of the manor. Outside, a late autumn chill had descended, clinging to the ancient stones of Finch Manor. Inside, the fire in the hearth cast a flickering, nervous light across the leather-bound books and the polished gleam of antique furniture. Sir Alistair Finch gestured to an armchair opposite his desk, his movements betraying a tremor he fought to conceal. The Duke of Ashworth, his face inscrutable, settled into the chair, his posture still impeccably composed. "Thank you for coming, Arthur," Sir Alistair began, his voice a little hoarse. He cleared his throat, I appreciate your making the journey." The Duke offered a benign smile. "My dear Alistair, it is always a pleasure. You spoke of a delicate matter in your invitation. Has some unscrupulous dealer tried to pass off a forgery as a genuine artifact?" His tone was light, unsuspecting, which only made Sir Alistair's task harder. "No, Arthur, nothing so mundane, I fear," Sir Alistair replied, his gaze dropping to his hands, clasped tightly on the desk. "This concerns something far more profound than a mere forgery of art. It concerns the forgery of trust." A subtle shift in the Duke's posture. His eyes, though still calm, sharpened. "Indeed. You pique my curiosity. What is this grave matter?" Sir Alistair reached into a folder on his desk and extracted a single, folded sheet of paper. He placed it before the Duke, not quite unfolding it fully. "This, Arthur," Sir Alistair said, his voice grave, "is a summary of my recent audit. A copy, mind you, but an accurate representation. It details, with irrefutable precision, a systematic misappropriation of public funds, embezzlement plain and simple." The Duke leaned forward, his eyes scanning the precise columns of figures, the dates, the coded references that pointed to specific government accounts and projects. Initial shock transformed into a dawning, terrible horror. His face, usually a picture of aristocratic calm, began to drain of colour. A faint sheen of sweat appeared on his brow. "This is preposterous," the Duke finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, yet laced with a desperate edge. "A fabrication, a dreadful mistake." "I spent weeks on this, Arthur," Sir Alistair countered, his voice gentle but firm. "Cross-referencing every detail, there is no mistake, the figures do not lie. And your name, Arthur, it appears far too frequently, far too centrally for mere coincidence." The Duke recoiled as if struck. His reputation, his distinguished career, his very freedom, all of it hung by the slender thread of this document. He saw the meticulous detail, the irrefutable logic. He saw the end of everything he had built. A flicker of panic, cold and absolute, crossed his features. His eyes darted to Sir Alistair, then to the damning copy. Sir Alistair, seeing the Duke's despair, felt a profound sadness. "Arthur," he continued, his voice heavy, "I came to you first. Because I hoped you would have an explanation. A way to rectify this. The original document, with even more specific details, is secure. It is hidden in plain sight in my Fabergé Imperial Egg, within the miniature music box compartment. Only I know its true inner workings." The Duke's eyes, wide with terror, immediately snapped to the Fabergé Imperial Egg in its display case, a gleaming, innocent masterpiece. He had not seen the original placed there, nor had Sir Alistair demonstrated the specific inner workings beyond the mere mention of the hidden compartment. The crucial truth was now associated with that egg. "Alistair, you must not," the Duke pleaded, his voice rising in desperate urgency. He pushed his chair back, half rising. Sir Alistair looked at him, his expression one of profound sadness, not accusation. "I must, Arthur, for the sake of the country, for the sake of what is right. But I came to you first." But there was no explanation, no rectification possible for the Duke, only ruin. The existence of the original hidden in the egg was the final devastating blow. In that moment, a desperate, animalistic instinct surged. It was not planned, not premeditated. It was the spontaneous, violent impulse of a cornered man seeing his entire world crumble before his eyes. His gaze fell upon a heavy bronze paperweight, shaped like a miniature bust of Socrates, sitting innocently by Sir Alistair's elbow. His hand shot out, not in reason, but in a primitive, desperate lunge to silence the truth and erase the evidence forever. The quiet of Finch Manor, usually so profound, was shattered just before dawn by a sound that tore through the very fabric of sleep, a high-pitched, guttural shriek, laced with pure, unadulterated terror. It echoed through the grand corridors, instantly rousing the household. Hastings sat bolt upright in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What on earth was that, Poirot?" he exclaimed, already fumbling for his dressing gown. It sounded like someone had seen a ghost. Poirot was already on his feet, his dressing gown impeccably tied, his usually precise movements imbued with a rare urgency. "More substantial than a ghost, mon ami, I fear," he murmured, his small, keen eyes already alight with a professional interest that Hastings found both morbid and impressive. That was the sound of a discovery, a most unpleasant one. They followed the growing commotion downstairs, a knot of servants and family members already converging towards Sir Alister's study. The shriek, they soon learned, had come from Miss Beatrice Plum, Sir Alister's efficient personal assistant, who had been arriving early to lay out his morning papers and prepare his tea. She now stood, huddled against the doorframe, her face ashen, pointing a trembling finger into the study, unable to form a coherent word. Lady Eleanor, her elegant frame trembling, pushed through the small crowd, her hand pressed to her mouth, a low moan escaping her lips. Her son, Reggie, a picture of dishevelled alarm in his hastily donned silk dressing gown, followed closely, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something less definable, perhaps a dawning awareness of profound change. Madame Dubois, the art curator, stood apart, her arms crossed, her expression one of detached, almost clinical observation. Inside the study, bathed in the cool pre-dawn light filtering through the tall windows, a ghastly tableau awaited. Sir Alister Finch lay sprawled beside his large mahogany desk, his silver hair dishevelled, a dark spreading stain blooming on the side of his temple. A heavy bronze paperweight shaped like a miniature bust of Socrates lay nearby, slightly askew on the ornate rug. He was utterly, undeniably still. Lady Eleanor let out a strangled cry, a raw, guttural sound of pure grief. Reggie quickly moved to support her, his face grim. "Father! Oh my God, Father!" he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. But even through his distress, Poirot noted a subtle shift in Reggie's gaze, a quick, almost imperceptible flicker around the room, assessing, calculating. "Someone fetch the local constable." Reggie finally managed, his voice strained. "And a doctor, quickly. Though, I fear it's too late." Madame Dubois, ever composed, finally broke her silence, her voice low and even. "He was so meticulous, so careful. What could possibly have happened?" Her gaze swept over the scene, seemingly searching for answers. But Poirot detected a hint of something else, a subtle, almost imperceptible redirection of focus. Within the hour, the local police arrived, led by Inspector Davies, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow and a practical, no-nonsense approach to rural crime. He took in the scene with a professional, if somewhat overwhelmed, air. His initial assessment, as he conferred with his younger constable, leaned heavily towards an unfortunate accident, perhaps a fall in the dark, or a robbery gone wrong that had escalated unexpectedly. "No forced entry, it seems," Inspector Davies rumbled, examining the study doorframe and the secure windows. "Everything appears to be latched from the inside. Looks like he might have stumbled, perhaps in the dark, and hit his head on something. Or disturbed an intruder already inside. What's this?" He nudged the bronze paperweight with the toe of his boot. "Heavy thing, could certainly do some damage." He looked at the assembled household, his gaze moving across the room. Anything appear to be missing? Any valuables disturbed? Lady Eleanor, now being gently supported by Reggie, shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, Inspector. Sir Alister's collection is so vast. He kept an inventory, but—" Her voice trailed off, choked with fresh sobs. Reggie stepped forward, his voice suddenly clearer, firmer. "The Fabergé Imperial Egg, Inspector." "It's gone from its display case." He gestured dramatically towards the empty, softly lit pedestal in the corner of the room. "Father's most prized possession. This wasn't an accident, Inspector. Someone murdered him for it." His declaration hung in the air, a clear, definitive statement that immediately provided a motive for both theft and violence. Inspector Davies nodded slowly, his initial theory already shifting. A high-value theft certainly made more sense of the scene than a clumsy fall. Right, a robbery then went wrong. Standard procedure now, everyone. No one touches anything. We'll need statements from everyone in the house, a full account of the evening, and send for the forensic team from headquarters. This is a job for them. Poirot, meanwhile, remained conspicuously quiet. He had observed everything with his usual meticulousness: the unnatural angle of Sir Alistair's body, the subtle disarray of papers on the desk that suggested a struggle rather than a simple fall, the nuanced expressions on the faces of the household. And as Reggie declared the theft of the Fabergé Egg, Poirot's keen eyes, ever restless, moved to the now empty display case. A flicker, a momentary, almost imperceptible shadow of doubt crossed his features. The Fabergé Egg vanished. And yet something about Reggie's immediate, almost theatrical pronouncement felt incomplete. While Inspector Davies, with his practical, by-the-book approach, began interviewing household members in the drawing room and dispatching constables to secure the perimeter, Hercule Poirot moved through Sir Alistair's study with the quiet intensity of a predator, his eyes missing absolutely nothing. Hastings, feeling rather useless and increasingly a nuisance, stood by the doorway, occasionally offering an unhelpful suggestion or a sympathetic nod to the distraught Lady Eleanor, who still lingered, held by Reggie. "Poirot, they've sent for the forensic people from headquarters now," Hastings murmured, attempting to whisper, though his voice still carried slightly in the hushed, tense room. "Won't they just, well, find everything? Fingerprints, bloodstains, all that scientific business?" Poirot merely hummed, a low, thoughtful sound, his gaze fixed on Sir Alistair's large mahogany desk. "The official methods have their place, mon ami. They are excellent for what is seen, the obvious, the tangible. But my little grey cells, they are for what is unseen, the nuances, the psychology, the silent whispers of the human heart." He ignored the heavy bronze paperweight, which Inspector Davies had already noted as the potential murder weapon, and focused instead on the subtle nuances of the disarray on the desk. A stack of neatly arranged financial papers, usually held down by a decorative paperweight, now lay askew, as if swept aside in a hurried, violent movement. A small, ornate silver inkwell, a gift from some dignitary perhaps, was nudged slightly from its usual precise alignment, leaving a faint, dark smear on the polished wood. These were not the signs of an accidental fall in the dark, or a clumsy stumble. This was the unmistakable aftermath of a struggle, however brief and one-sided it might have been. His eyes drifted from the desk to the empty Fabergé display case in the corner, its soft internal light now shining on nothing but vacant space. "So the celebrated egg, it is vanished," he mused aloud, a frown deepening on his brow. "Most unfortunate. A great loss, no doubt, for the collection." "Reggie certainly thinks so," Hastings remarked, trying to sound helpful. He seemed quite convinced it was a robbery, said it was his father's most prized possession, and valuable too, worth a king's ransom, I imagine. Poirot straightened, a glint entering his eyes, a familiar spark of intellectual challenge. "Precisely, Hastings. Valuable, but a robbery? If the purpose was merely theft, for the monetary value, why the struggle that left Sir Alistair dead? Why such a violent blow to the head when a quick incapacitation, a mere stunning blow, might suffice, allowing for a cleaner, quieter escape? And why leave a heavy paperweight so obviously at the scene? A professional thief, mon ami, seeks to leave no trace, no obvious weapon. No, this crime, it has the whiff of something more personal, more desperate, more impulsive." He approached the desk again, this time with a different purpose. He lowered his head slightly, his small, rounded figure almost disappearing behind the imposing furniture. He inhaled, a delicate, almost imperceptible sniff, like a bloodhound catching a faint trail. Hastings watched, perplexed, unsure what oddity his friend was performing now. "What is it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, trying to discern if there was any discernible smell. "Do you smell fear? Or perhaps old cigar smoke?" Perhaps, Hastings, Poirot said, still inhaling, his nostrils flaring faintly, a tiny, almost comical movement. But also something else, something quite specific, something that does not belong. He moved slowly around the desk, his head tilted, his gaze scanning the very air, as if trying to catch invisible particles or threads of scent. A faint aroma, curious, distinct, not a scent I associate with old books or polished wood, or the usual domestic perfumes of a grand manor. It is precise, chemical, yes, but of a particular nature. Lingering near the desk, yes, but perhaps fractionally stronger near the armchair where the Duke had sat, where the confrontation might have been at its most intense. He committed the scent to his phenomenal olfactory memory, filing it away for later identification. His attention then shifted to the Duke of Ashworth. The Duke had remained in the study longer than the other household members, now speaking in low, modulated tones with Inspector Davies, offering condolences and earnest assurances of full cooperation. The Duke's composure was, to Poirot's discerning eye, almost unnervingly perfect. His face, though grave, showed no discernible crack in its dignified facade of sorrow. No hint of the frantic desperation Poirot knew must have occurred here, no trace of the soul-shattering moment of violence. "He takes it very well, doesn't he, Poirot?" Hastings whispered, observing the Duke's stoic bearing. "For a man who's just lost a lifelong friend in such a dreadful way, he's very composed." "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot replied, his gaze unwavering on the Duke, his eyes like two keen surgical instruments. "Too well, perhaps. Grief, it can manifest in many forms, yes. Shock, tears, anger, even a numb silence. But this is the composure of a man determined to control every single muscle, every fleeting expression. Observe the slight tension in the jaw, the way the fingers occasionally clench, almost imperceptibly, against the fabric of his trousers when he believes no one is watching. It is the control of one who has much to hide and much to lose. Poirot knew, with the certainty that only his little grey cells could provide, that the missing Fabergé egg was merely a smokescreen, a grand, glittering distraction. The true vanished valuable was not the bejewelled masterpiece, but whatever Sir Alistair had so meticulously hidden within it. The struggle on the desk, the precise nature of the fatal blow, the killer's hurried actions to make the scene appear to be a robbery, all pointed to a desperate, spur-of-the-moment act to silence a truth and seize a specific, unseen item. And that faint, unusual chemical scent, that was the first vital thread pulled from the tangled skein of the crime. It would lead him, he felt sure, directly to the web of lies woven around Sir Alistair's final, devastating discovery. Chapter 3. The Search for Truth. The shock of Sir Alistair's death had settled into a grim pall over Finch Manor, but for Hercule Poirot it was merely the opening gambit in a deadly game. While Inspector Davies busied himself with the more overt aspects of the investigation, cordoning off the study, interviewing constables and waiting for the forensic team, Poirot embarked on his own systematic round of interrogations. His method was not brute force, but gentle probing, like a skilled surgeon looking for the precise nerve. His first port of call was Lady Eleanor. She sat in the drawing-room, a delicate lace handkerchief clutched in her trembling hand, her face etched with profound sorrow. Hastings, ever the gentleman, offered words of comfort. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice surprisingly soft, "my deepest condolences. A terrible tragedy." Lady Eleanor nodded weakly. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. It's unbelievable. Alistair gone so suddenly." Her eyes were red-rimmed, but beneath the grief, Poirot detected a palpable anxiety. "You must have been devoted to him," Poirot observed. "His passions, his projects?" She flinched almost imperceptibly. "Alistair was a man of great integrity, Monsieur Poirot. He had many passions, his collections, of course, and lately he had been delving into history, Old documents. He found it quite absorbing. Her gaze darted to the empty Fabergé display case. To think someone would murder him for a bauble, it is beyond comprehension.
Indeed, Poirot murmured, making a mental note of her hesitation regarding his projects. And the house? The staff? All in order?
Always in order, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice regaining some of its brittle strength. Alistair insisted upon it. We cannot have a scandal, not on top of this. The scandal was clearly a far greater fear than the mere loss of a valuable egg. Poirot sensed she knew, or suspected, something deeper about Sir Alistair's recent activities, something she desperately wished to keep concealed. She was a woman more afraid of soiled reputation than genuine danger. Next, it was Reggie Finch's turn. He sat opposite Poirot, fidgeting, his eyes frequently straying to the study door, as if expecting to see his father emerge. "Dreadful business, Monsieur Poirot," Reggie began, running a hand through his already dishevelled hair. "Utterly dreadful. And the winter egg? Gone." Father treasured that more than anything. Must have been a professional thief, wouldn't you say? Someone knew exactly what they were after. "You seem very certain it was the egg, Monsieur Finch," Poirot remarked, his eyes twinkling.
Reggie shrugged, his nervousness evident. Well, what else? Father was a collector, and it's incredibly valuable. Look, Monsieur Poirot, frankly, I'm in a bit of a financial tight spot. Had hoped Father might help me out. But now, with the estate, I suppose. Well, it's a blessing in disguise, isn't it? Not that I wished him dead, mind you. God forbid. But one has to be practical. He spoke with a disarming, almost crude frankness, his desperation for inheritance making him appear almost too perfect a suspect for theft, perhaps even a desperate act of violence. Hastings visibly recoiled.
"Reggie!" Hastings interjected aghast. Poirot merely raised a hand, silencing Hastings. "Indeed, Monsieur Finch, practicality is a virtue, and your alibi for the night, it is watertight." Reggie instantly became defensive. "I was in my room asleep. Didn't hear a thing until Miss Plum screamed. I can't prove that, of course, but who could?" Poirot simply nodded, allowing the implication to hang in the air. Reggie was a man who wanted the egg and the inheritance, but Poirot doubted he possessed the cunning for such a meticulously planned murder. Madame Dubois, the art curator, was next. She received Poirot in the gallery, surrounded by her beloved artifacts, her posture rigid, her expression one of professional disdain. Sir Alistair was an enthusiastic collector, she stated, her voice clipped. But his methods were at times unconventional. He valued rarity above all, sometimes overlooking the more profound artistic merit, she gestured vaguely. Perhaps he acquired something contentious, something that someone might wish to reclaim with extreme prejudice. She was subtly redirecting suspicion, perhaps towards some shadowy figure in the illicit art market, a world she knew intimately. "You have a wide network in the art world, I understand, madame." Poirot probed gently.
"Indeed. One must to keep abreast of such things. One hears whispers, unpleasant whispers at times." She offered no specifics, merely a vague hint of intrigue, her extensive network an obvious source of information, or indeed of plausible deniability.
Mr. Silas Blackwood, the chief of security, was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was with unnerving precision. He led Poirot and Hastings through the Manor's intricate security system, detailing every sensor, every camera, every reinforced lock. "The system was fully active last night," Blackwood stated, his voice a low monotone. "No alarms triggered, no external breach. The study windows and door were secure. Impossible for an intruder to enter without detection." His eyes, however, seemed almost possessive as he gestured to a valuable Renaissance sculpture. Poirot noted his intense privacy, almost a hermit-like aura. When questioned about the possible failure of the system, a subtle defensiveness crept into his tone. "The system does not fail, Monsieur Poirot. If there was no alarm, the intruder was already inside or had access." The implication was clear. It must be an inside job. Finally, Miss Beatrice Plum. Her account of the evening's routines was remarkably detailed and consistent, outlining Sir Alistair's last known movements, his tea, his requests. Sir Alistair retired to his study around 11, she explained, her hands clasped tightly. He often worked late. I prepared a final pot of chamomile tea for him just before midnight. He preferred to be undisturbed after that. "And when did you last see the Fabergé Egg, Mademoiselle Plum?" Poirot asked. She hesitated just for a fraction of a second, her eyes flickering away. It was there when I brought the tea, always is, in its place." "And did you notice anything unusual around that time? A sound, a shadow, a movement?"
She shook her head, then paused, a very slight, almost imperceptible hesitation. "Only, I thought I heard a door close faintly. Downstairs, but I dismissed it, assumed it was Mr. Blackwood doing his rounds, perhaps. It was nothing, really." She quickly dismissed it, as if afraid she had said too much or too little. Poirot, however, filed away that specific slight hesitation regarding a time frame and a faint sound. It was the mark of a tiny, possibly trivial truth being suppressed or perhaps simply misremembered. All of them, Poirot deduced, had something to hide or something they wished to protect. But only one of them held the true secret.
While Inspector Davies's team meticulously dusted for fingerprints and photographed the scene, Hercule Poirot retreated to a quiet corner of the drawing room, beckoning Hastings. He paced, a small, agitated figure, his mind a whirlwind of observations. No, he muttered, shaking his head. "It does not fit, Hastings. It does not fit at all." "What doesn't fit, Poirot?" Hastings asked, ever eager to grasp the thread of his friend's deductions. "The missing Fabergé egg, Reggie's financial woes. It all seems rather straightforward, if tragic. A valuable object, a desperate man, a moment of passion."
Poirot stopped his pacing abruptly, his eyes fixed on some unseen point beyond the window. "Straightforward, my dear Hastings? When has a murder ever been straightforward, especially one committed in such a house by such a blow?" He tapped a manicured finger against his temple. "Consider the man, Hastings. Sir Alistair Finch, a man of impeccable order, of almost obsessive precision, a man who collects not for mere accumulation, but for the inherent beauty and historical significance."
"But also for value, surely," Hastings interjected. "The Fabergé eggs are worth a fortune." "Indeed. A fortune that is easily traceable, easily identifiable. A thief who wishes to sell such a piece would find himself in a nest of hornets. It screams stolen. No, this crime, it has a different fragrance entirely. The Fabergé egg, its exquisite beauty, its immense value, they are but a decoy, a very clever distraction."
Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming with intellectual fervour. "The motive, Hastings, lies not in the taking of the egg, but in the contents of the egg, or rather, what it contained. Sir Alistair, he was a meticulous man. He would not hide a mere trifle in such a secure, ingenious place. Whatever was within that egg, it was the true treasure, and the true reason for his death."
Later that afternoon, after the initial shock had somewhat subsided, Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor again, ostensibly to offer further condolences. He found her still fragile, but composed. "Lady Eleanor," Poirot began, his voice sympathetic, "I understand Sir Alistair was recently engaged in some personal research? Old documents, I believe?" She stiffened. Yes, Monsieur Poirot, he had developed a rather intense interest in historical audits, tax records, old government reports. He said it was a matter of civic hygiene. He found some irregularities, I know. He became quite agitated about it, in fact. Said it pointed to disreputable dealings. She wrung her hands. He was so private about it. He wouldn't even tell me the full extent of what he found, only that it was deeply disturbing and involved very high places. Poirot's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. High places, you say? Government affairs, perhaps? Poirot thanked her and left her to her grief, his thoughts racing. High places. Government affairs. This confirmed his growing suspicion. He then made his way back to Sir Alistair's study, now cleared by the forensics team, but still holding the echoes of the fatal confrontation. He spent a long time examining Sir Alistair's personal effects: a leather-bound daybook, a collection of neatly sharpened pencils, a few recent library slips. Nothing immediately incriminating, but his sharp eyes noted a particular, well-worn personal daybook on a lower shelf, seemingly innocent. Upon closer inspection, he felt a subtle anomaly in its spine and a slight weight imbalance in its cover, hinting at a hidden compartment or a false bottom. He carefully retrieved it. "Inspector Davies!" Poirot called out, his voice cutting through the subdued atmosphere. Davies, who was supervising the collection of a few remaining police items, turned, surprised by Poirot's urgent tone. "I believe I have found something of considerable interest amongst Sir Alistair's effects. It appears to be a personal daybook, but with an unusual construction." Davies approached, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Monsieur Poirot? Another hidden compartment?" "Precisely," Poirot affirmed, carefully holding the daybook. "I detect an anomaly, suggestive of a false bottom. Given Sir Alistair's meticulous nature and his recent auditing projects, I suspect this may contain further, perhaps even critical, information pertaining to his investigations. It would be highly irregular for me to open it alone. It is evidence." Davies nodded. "You're right, Monsieur Poirot. It's a chain of evidence. Do you suspect it's coded?" "It is highly probable," Poirot replied. Sir Alistair was a man who appreciated discretion, and if it contains sensitive information about high places, as Lady Eleanor suggested, a code would be logical. Davies paused, then made a decision. "Monsieur Poirot, I've seen your methods. If it's a code, you're more likely than anyone on my team to crack it. With my full authority, I ask that you examine this daybook. Please proceed with caution and report all findings directly to me. We need to know what Sir Alistair uncovered." He handed the daybook formally to Poirot. True to his methodical nature, Poirot retired to his own room that evening with the daybook, now working under the official sanction of the police. With the aid of his magnifying glass and a thin, delicate probe, he meticulously worked on the book's spine, eventually discovering a cleverly constructed, almost invisible seam. Within, nestled in a shallow, hollowed-out compartment, was not a single document, but a thin, tightly bound ledger. Its pages were filled with Sir Alistair's precise handwriting, not in plain English, but in a numerical and symbol-based code, clearly a more detailed, back-up record of his investigation. Poirot spent hours, his little grey cells working at full capacity, comparing the symbols to Sir Alistair's other notes and cross-referencing against publicly available financial reports he had quietly requested. By dawn, the code had yielded its secrets, a complete, verifiable summary of the embezzlement, detailing dates, amounts, and, crucially, the names of the accounts involved. This, he now knew, was Sir Alistair's ultimate insurance, a failsafe against his primary document being destroyed. This was not the work of a man simply indulging a hobby. This was the work of a man building a case and taking the most extreme precautions. He needed to observe the Duke again, now with this new information firmly in his mind. He found the Duke of Ashworth in the drawing-room, seemingly engrossed in a newspaper. Poirot entered, ostensibly, to admire a painting. He then casually steered the conversation. "A tragic loss for the nation, the passing of Sir Alistair," Poirot mused aloud, addressing no one in particular but ensuring the Duke was within earshot. A man of such integrity. One wonders what he would have made of the current state of affairs in certain government departments. One hears whispers, does one not, of inefficiency. Perhaps worse. The Duke's hand, which had been holding the newspaper steady, gave the slightest, almost imperceptible tremor. His jaw tightened. He cleared his throat. Indeed, Monsieur Poirot. These are troubling times, but one must have faith in our institutions, must one not? Rumours, alas, are easily fabricated. His voice was controlled, perhaps a little too much so. The casual mention of government departments and financial integrity had clearly struck a nerve. He folded the newspaper with undue neatness, avoiding Poirot's gaze. "Faith, yes," Poirot responded, his eyes gleaming, "but also vigilance. Sir Alistair, he was a vigilant man. He had a profound sense of civic duty." Poirot observed the flicker in the Duke's eyes, a fleeting shadow of discomfort, a tension that belied his calm exterior. It was a silent admission, a nervous tell that spoke volumes to Poirot's little grey cells. "The egg, Hastings," Poirot confided later that evening to his bewildered companion. "It was never about the Fabergé egg. It was about what was in the egg. A document so damning, so vital, that someone was willing to commit murder to retrieve it, and that someone, mon ami, has a very particular interest in the integrity of government and a very practiced hand at maintaining a facade." His little grey cells were now fully, irrevocably focused on the Duke of Ashworth. For Hercule Poirot, a crime scene was not merely a collection of objects and bodies, it was an orchestra of minute details, each playing a tiny, crucial note. And among the most potent instruments in this orchestra was scent. The faint, unusual aroma he had detected in Sir Alistair's study after the discovery of the body had lingered in his extraordinary memory, a subtle discord in the otherwise quiet composition of the room. Now, with the understanding that the true motive was a missing document, not merely a missing egg, that scent became paramount. He returned to the study, ostensibly to review the forensic team's initial report, but his true purpose was more delicate. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a connoisseur sampling the rarest of wines. He knelt by the desk, then by the empty Fabergé display, then by the armchair where the Duke had sat, his nostrils flaring almost imperceptibly. "Poirot, what on earth are you doing?" Hastings asked, observing his friend's curious movements. "Are you looking for invisible footprints?" "Invisible, yes, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes closed for a moment, savouring the elusive fragrance. "But not footprints, olfactory evidence, the most subtle, yet often the most truthful of witnesses." He stood up, a small, satisfied nod. "The scent, it is still here. Faint, yes, but unmistakably present." "What kind of scent?" Hastings pressed, leaning closer, attempting to sniff the air himself, but detecting nothing beyond the faint mustiness of old paper and furniture polish. "Ah, that is the question, is it not?" Poirot replied, stroking his moustache. "It is not a perfume. It is not an everyday domestic smell. It is precise, chemical, yes, but of a particular nature." Over the next few hours, Poirot embarked on a quiet, almost meditative quest. He walked through the manor, visiting various rooms, occasionally stopping to sniff a piece of furniture, a tapestry, or even a book. He even ventured into the Duke's private sitting room, where the Duke had held a brief, hushed phone conversation earlier that morning, claiming he needed privacy to manage parliamentary affairs. "Anything, Poirot?" Hastings asked, when they were finally alone in their own sitting room. Poirot picked up a piece of ordinary stationery from their desk. He held it to his nose. "This paper, it smells of wood pulp, of a little starch. Normal. But the scent in Sir Alistair's study, it is different. It evokes something I have encountered before, but rarely. Something connected to officialdom." He then began to formulate a mental catalogue of all the peculiar smells he had ever encountered in his long and illustrious career. He thought of the faint, metallic tang of old coins, the acrid bite of certain photographic chemicals, the dusty dryness of ancient Egyptian tombs. None quite matched. Then an image flashed into his mind, a case years ago involving espionage and a particular secure document that had been handled by agents. "Hastings!" Poirot announced suddenly, his eyes widening with recognition. "I have it! The scent! It is a very specific type of ink, or perhaps a specialized paper treatment, something used for high-security documents, government documents, Hastings, papers of state, documents that are not meant for the casual perusal." Hastings looked utterly bewildered. "Government ink? What on earth are you talking about? How can you tell that from a smell?" "Because, mon ami, certain government bodies for security purposes use inks with unique chemical signatures, or the paper itself is treated with a compound to prevent counterfeiting or unauthorized duplication. This scent, it is a very rare form of chemical component used in high-security government inks or perhaps in specialized sealing waxes or paper treatments for state secrets. It is designed to be subtle, but to those with the nose for it, it is unmistakable." The implications hit Hastings with the force of a physical blow. So, someone who handles sensitive government documents was in that room, and they left their scent behind? "Precisely," Poirot affirmed, a grim satisfaction settling on his face. "This narrows the field considerably, does it not? We are no longer looking for a common thief or even a desperate relative. We are looking for someone with regular, intimate access to the most secure chambers of the state."
His mind immediately leapt to the Duke of Ashworth, a distinguished member of Parliament, a man whose entire professional life revolved around handling sensitive state documents, often sealed with such specialized inks and waxes. The Duke's composure, his subtle tension, and now this unique chemical fingerprint. The pieces were slotting together with an alarming, irrefutable logic.
"This is not a perfume, Hastings," Poirot reiterated, his voice low and serious. "It is a silent scream, a chemical signature of a man deeply embroiled in the very secret Sir Alistair was investigating. The scent, it links the murderer directly to the very world of the vanished valuables." While Inspector Davies's team meticulously dusted for fingerprints and photographed the scene, Hercule Poirot began his own methodical search, his conviction growing that the missing Fabergé Imperial Egg had not left the manor. "No, no, no," he muttered to Hastings, shaking his head. "It does not fit, mon ami. A professional thief would not take such an identifiable object and then leave the scene of a murder so messy. It is too unpolished. This crime, it screams of haste and panic, not calculated larceny."
But if it wasn't taken, Hastings pondered, his brow furrowed, where could it be? The police have searched everywhere and the servants have been frantic, turning the house upside down. "Ah, but they look in the obvious places, Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming with intellectual challenge. "For such a valuable object, one searches safes, strong boxes, master bedrooms. But the killer, in their desperation, would choose a place that was obvious to them for a quick disposal, yet entirely overlooked by others. Somewhere mundane, somewhere so unglamorous, so beneath notice, that it would be invisible in plain sight."
Poirot's search was a meticulous exploration of the manor's forgotten corners. He bypassed the grand public rooms and the well-trodden servant passages, focusing instead on the peripheral spaces. Disused storage rooms, narrow antechambers, and little-used service staircases. He envisioned a killer, adrenaline-fueled, needing to dispose of the object quickly without drawing attention, but unable to take it outside the secure confines of the house. His instinct finally led him to a peculiar, unassuming display cabinet in a shadowed corner of a narrow antechamber off the billiard room. It was dusty, long empty of any trophies or curios, blending seamlessly with the dark oak paneling. It was, in its very insignificance, the perfect hiding place for something of extraordinary value when one wished it to vanish without leaving the house. He opened the small, squeaky glass door, and there, nestled behind a stack of faded equestrian pamphlets, almost camouflaged by the gloom, lay the Fabergé Imperial Egg. Hastings, who had been trailing dutifully behind, gasped, his jaw dropping. "Poirot, you've found it! By Jove, you've actually found it, after everyone else gave up." He took a step forward, his hand instinctively reaching out, but Poirot gently, yet firmly, intercepted his arm. "Do not touch it, mon ami, not yet," Poirot commanded, his voice tight with anticipation. He retrieved a pair of fine, white cotton gloves from his pocket and slipped them on. With utmost care, he lifted the egg. Its exquisite beauty, still undiminished, even in its ignominious hiding place, seemed to glow in the dim light. "Hastings!" Poirot announced, his voice suddenly sharp with urgency. "Fetch Inspector Davies, at once! He will want to see this immediately. This is not merely a discovery. It is the turning point."
Within minutes, Inspector Davies, looking rather rumpled but alert, arrived, followed closely by a curious Hastings. Poirot, still gloved, presented the egg, explaining where it had been found. Davies's eyes widened in surprise and growing respect.
"Well, I'll be," the inspector muttered, carefully examining the exquisite object in Poirot's gloved hands. "Hidden in plain sight, indeed. My men scoured the likely spots. Clever, Monsieur Poirot. Very clever." Poirot then carried the egg back to the study, now mostly clear of official forensics equipment, and placed it on a pristine white cloth on Sir Alister's desk, under the direct, unsparing light of a powerful lamp, the inspector peering over his shoulder. He began his meticulous examination, guiding the inspector's eye. The egg's exterior, as you see, Inspector, is pristine. No smudges, no fingerprints visible to the naked eye. The enamel shines, the diamonds sparkle. It looks exactly as it had before it vanished. But the true evidence lies deeper, within. He remembered Sir Alister's precise description of the music box and its inner workings, the delicate mechanism that concealed the secret within. He carefully manipulated the egg, his movements precise, almost surgical, the inspector watching intently. He located the tiny, almost invisible catch that allowed the miniature music box to detach from the base. He clicked it open. Then he peered closely at the internal mechanism, particularly near the hidden compartment's clasp, inviting the inspector to observe. He turned it slowly, allowing the lamp's intense light to catch every angle, every minute detail. And then he saw it and pointed it out to Davies. "It is almost imperceptible, Inspector," Poirot explained. "A hairline mark that one might dismiss as a trick of the light or a natural imperfection in the aged gold. A microscopic scratch. It is not on the polished outer surface, which would indicate clumsy handling by a thief. No, this mark is on the internal mechanism of the music box, right near the tiny lever that released the hidden compartment. It is not a smooth, clean scratch, but one that suggests hurried, forceful, and panicked manipulation. As if someone, in a desperate rush after committing murder, had struggled to open the compartment, failing to employ the delicate touch that Sir Alister had described as part of its true inner workings. Inspector Davies leaned in, his eyes squinting, then slowly widening as he grasped the significance. "By Jove, you're right, Monsieur Poirot. Barely visible, but it's there. A fresh mark, too, not old wear." "Precisely, Inspector," Poirot said, his voice brimming with triumph. "This, Inspector, is the signature of desperation and betrayal. This minute, almost invisible micro-scratch on the internal mechanism of the music box near the hidden compartment's clasp," he indicated the tiny flaw, "confirms a hurried, forceful manipulation from within. It proves the egg was opened after the death of Sir Alister by someone who knew the vital information was hidden there, but in their terror and haste could not achieve the delicate precision Sir Alister would have employed. They tore it open to get the proof." He looked at Inspector Davies, his eyes alight with intellectual victory. "This, combined with the unique chemical scent I detected earlier, and the fact the egg was hidden within the manor itself to feign an outside robbery, forms an irrefutable chain of evidence. It proves that the killer was an insider and that they were in frantic possession of the egg in that study immediately following the fatal blow. The killer took the contents, left this crucial scuff mark, and then hid the egg, all to create a false trail." The narrative was now complete, the pieces of the puzzle assembled with exquisite precision, and the local authority fully appraised of the evidence. The game, mon ami, is almost played. Chapter 4. The Duke's Downfall. The following morning dawned cold and grey, mirroring the sombre mood that had settled irrevocably over Finch Manor. Breakfast was a hushed affair, punctuated by the clinking of cutlery and the distant murmur of Inspector Davies's latest phone call. It was amidst this strained atmosphere that Hercule Poirot made his simple, yet profound, request. "Inspector," Poirot addressed Davies, who was just concluding his conversation, "if you would be so kind, I would appreciate it greatly if you could assemble everyone in the drawing-room. Lady Eleanor, Monsieur Reggie, Madame Dubois, Monsieur Blackwood, Mademoiselle Plum, and of course His Grace the Duke of Ashworth." Inspector Davies, though still slightly bewildered by Poirot's unorthodox methods and sudden declarations of smoking guns, had witnessed enough of the Belgian's brilliance to defer. He nodded, his brow still furrowed with the weight of the high-profile case. "Certainly, Monsieur Poirot, if you think it will help us get to the bottom of this." He cast a glance towards the Duke, whose composure remained unblemished. "We're all eager for some answers." Hastings, sitting beside Poirot, felt a thrill of anticipation mingled with a distinct nervousness. "You're going to do it, aren't you, Poirot? The full performance? The grand revelation?" Poirot merely adjusted a cufflink. "When the pieces are all assembled, Hastings, it is only logical to present the completed puzzle. The truth, it demands to be heard." One by one, the household gathered in the drawing-room, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Lady Eleanor sat stiffly on a velvet sofa, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes red from weeping, yet filled with a fragile hope for clarity. Reggie paced restlessly by the fireplace, occasionally glancing at the Duke, a flicker of suspicion in his gaze. Madame Dubois had chosen a straight-backed chair, her posture as rigid as a statue, her gaze sharp, assessing as if she were appraising a difficult piece of art. Mr. Blackwood stood by the door, a silent, imposing guardian, his presence a constant reminder of the Manor's now breached security. Miss Plum sat demurely, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes downcast. The Duke of Ashworth entered last, his bearing as regal as ever, though Poirot noted the almost imperceptible clenching of his jaw, a muscle straining beneath the surface calm. He took a seat with an air of weary resignation, the picture of a grieving friend prepared to assist the investigation in any way he could. Inspector Davies stood by the grand fireplace, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice surprisingly subdued, "Monsieur Poirot has asked for this gathering. He believes he has made significant progress in understanding the tragic events surrounding Sir Alistair's death. I confess, I am as eager as any of you to hear what he has to say."
All eyes turned to Poirot. He stood by the desk, a small, unassuming figure, yet radiating an almost magnetic authority. He surveyed the faces before him, his gaze lingering briefly on each, taking in their apprehension, their curiosity, their hidden fears. The room was utterly silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards and the distant caw of a rook outside. The stage was set. The audience, captive and uneasy, awaited the final act. Poirot took a deep breath, his hands clasped before him, and began.
His gaze sweeping across the anxious faces gathered in Sir Alistair's drawing-room. The silence was absolute, save for Hastings's slightly nervous rustle in his chair. "Mesdames, Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are here to discover the truth behind the tragic demise of Sir Alistair Finch. Many theories have been put forward, many suspicions have naturally arisen. It is my purpose to strip away the falsehoods, to clear the names of the innocent, and to reveal the guilty." He turned first to Reggie Finch, who immediately stiffened. "Monsieur Reggie," Poirot said, "your financial difficulties are, regrettably, no secret, and your immediate declaration that the Fabergé Egg was missing and the implication of a robbery were quite prominent. One might deduce that you, desperate for funds, saw an opportunity." Reggie shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I just stated the obvious, Monsieur Poirot. Father's prized possession was gone." "Indeed," Poirot continued, a slight smile playing on his lips, "but your desperation, while real, Monsieur Reggie, would have led you to desire the egg itself, yes? To sell it, to gain the much-needed funds. Your motive, therefore, was merely acquisition, to murder your own father for this in such a clumsy, violent manner, only to then hide the egg within the very house you intended to inherit? No. Such an act lacks the cunning, the forethought of a man truly intending murder for profit. You wished for the inheritance, yes, but not through such a brutally direct path. You are dismissed from suspicion of murder." Reggie exhaled, a visible wave of relief washing over him, though he still looked somewhat sheepish. Next, Poirot's gaze settled on Madame Dubois. "Madame Dubois," he addressed her, "you have expressed a certain professional disdain for Sir Alistair's collecting methods. You spoke of contentious acquisitions, hinting at dangers from the illicit art market." Madame Dubois met his gaze coolly. Sir Alistair was at times reckless in his pursuit of rarity. It would not surprise me if he had made powerful enemies in the shadow world of art dealing. "A plausible theory, madame," Poirot conceded. "You, with your extensive network, would certainly be privy to such unpleasant whispers. And your knowledge of the art world could indeed point to external dangers. However, Sir Alistair's death was not the neat, efficient work of a professional assassin from such a world. It was a crime of impulse, of sudden, desperate violence. Moreover, the true object of this crime was not the egg itself, but the document concealed within, a document of no value to the art underworld, but of immeasurable value to another." He paused. "Your rivalry, madame, was intellectual, professional, not murderous. You are innocent." Madame Dubois merely inclined her head, a flicker of something unreadable in her sharp eyes. Then Mr. Silas Blackwood. "Monsieur Blackwood," Poirot said, his voice firm, "you explained the Manor's security system with unnerving precision. You stated quite adamantly that there was no external breach, implying an inside job. Your almost possessive attitude towards Sir Alistair's collection, your rigid adherence to order, one might consider a motive related to the preservation or protection of those treasures." Blackwood, normally unyielding, actually looked troubled. "My only duty was to protect Sir Alistair and his property, Monsieur Poirot. I would never. Sir Alistair trusted me." "Indeed, and your vigilance is admirable," Poirot acknowledged. "But your rigidness, your intense privacy, these are traits of a man devoted to his duties, yes, but not of a killer driven by the desperation to silence a damning truth. You lack the ultimate motive for this particular crime. The target was not the collection, but the information. You too, Monsieur Blackwood, are innocent of this murder." Blackwood gave a curt nod, his expression remaining grim but less tense. Finally, Miss Beatrice Plum. With the other members of the household acquitted of the murder, Hercule Poirot's gaze, sharp and unwavering, settled upon the Duke of Ashworth. The Duke, who had maintained a facade of weary patience throughout Poirot's previous pronouncements, now felt the full, cold weight of that gaze. His composure, meticulously crafted, began to show the faintest cracks. "We have cleared the innocent," Poirot stated, his voice now lower, more intense. "And now we approach the truth. The crime committed here was not, as Monsieur Reggie so eagerly suggested, a simple robbery of a precious artifact. The Fabergé Imperial Egg, in all its magnificence, was merely a clever, albeit accidental, receptacle for something far more crucial." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Sir Alistair Finch was not murdered for a jewel. He was murdered for a secret so potent, so deeply guarded, that it threatened to unravel a far grander, far more insidious deception. Poirot turned to Inspector Davies. "Inspector, you assumed, quite naturally, a theft of valuables. But the true vanished valuables in this case were not gold or precious stones. They were the very fabric of public trust, woven into the illicit threads of government finance." He then turned back to the room, his voice gaining momentum. Sir Alistair, a man of profound civic duty, had spent weeks uncovering a web of corruption, not merely incompetence, but systematic, high-level embezzlement within the very heart of the state.
A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization of what her husband's project truly entailed. Reggie stood frozen, his earlier relief replaced by dawning shock. Even Madame Dubois and Mr. Blackwood exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and grim understanding.
This discovery, Poirot continued, gesturing towards Sir Alistair's desk, was compiled onto something irrefutable, something that Sir Alistair, in his meticulous way, chose to hide in plain sight. He entrusted this vital information to the most secure yet most unexpected of places, within the miniature music box compartment of his beloved Fabergé Imperial Egg. Only he knew its true inner workings, its delicate release.
Hastings, sitting rigid in his chair, felt a shiver run down his spine. The Duke's face was now pale, his lips pressed into a thin, white line. His hands, resting on his knees, clenched and unclenched almost imperceptibly.
Sir Alistair, Poirot explained, his voice swelling with the gravity of the implied betrayal, was faced with an agonizing dilemma. He had undeniable proof of a monumental betrayal of public trust. But among the names, among the intricate connections of this web of corruption, was the name of a man he considered his dearest friend, a man he respected, admired, and cherished.
Poirot's voice softened, almost mournfully. This man, this trusted friend, was none other than you, Your Grace, the Duke of Ashworth.
The accusation, though delivered with quiet precision, struck the room like a thunderclap. Lady Eleanor let out a strangled cry. Reggie took a step back, staring at the Duke in disbelief. Inspector Davis's jaw dropped, his eyes flicking between Poirot and the Duke, as if unable to reconcile the distinguished member of Parliament with such a monstrous accusation. The Duke himself remained still, a statue carved of ice, but the control was visibly slipping. A muscle twitched uncontrollably in his cheek. His eyes, fixed on Poirot, held a mixture of desperate defiance and dawning despair. "It is inconceivable," the Duke finally spat out, his voice hoarse, a desperate attempt at his usual dignified tone. "A monstrous calumny. Sir Alistair and I, we were lifelong friends. He would never, could never suspect me of such a thing."
"Ah, but that is precisely it, Your Grace," Poirot countered, his voice sharp, with a sudden, devastating clarity. "Sir Alistair did suspect you, and because of that deep, long-standing friendship, because of the profound trust he reposed in you, he afforded you the ultimate courtesy. He did not go to the authorities first. He came to you. He invited you here to confront you privately, to give you the chance to explain, to perhaps even confess and seek redemption. He presented you with a copy of the evidence, believing that the truth, presented by a friend, would elicit honesty. And in that intimate, fateful conversation, he revealed the location of the original complete proof within the Fabergé Imperial Egg, his greatest act of trust, and it proved to be his undoing."
Poirot paused, letting the implication hang heavy, then delivered the critical new blow. "You believed, Your Grace, that by seizing and disposing of that original document, you had erased all trace of your crime. You believed you were safe. But Sir Alistair Finch was a scrupulous man, a man who understood the precarious nature of truth when faced with powerful deceit. He did not put all his eggs in one basket, so to speak." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he drew the small, leather-bound, seemingly innocuous daybook from inside his jacket. "Inspector Davies," he acknowledged, giving a nod to the now utterly captivated policeman. "As you recall, I identified this daybook as having a hidden compartment, and upon your authorization I proceeded to examine its contents." He then extracted the thin, tightly bound ledger from the daybook's false bottom, holding it aloft. Inside, Your Grace, Sir Alistair had compiled a second coded ledger, a complete summary of the transactions, cross-referenced and meticulously detailed. Hours of my little grey cells were spent deciphering its intricate numerical and symbol-based code, confirming my deepest suspicions. Poirot's voice resonated with absolute certainty as he held the ledger for all to see. "This, Your Grace," he declared, "is the irrefutable, tangible proof of your embezzlement. The true, vanished valuable, now unequivocally rediscovered and decoded. A truth you thought you had forever buried." The Duke's breath hitched. The carefully constructed mask of grief and innocence finally shattered, revealing the raw, desperate fear beneath. He knew now that Poirot had seen everything, deduced everything, and, crucially, found the final, undeniable piece of evidence that doomed him. The Duke of Ashworth stood frozen, his eyes wide with a desperate, hunted look, the carefully constructed facade of dignity crumbling visibly. Lady Eleanor gasped, covering her mouth with both hands, while Reggie stared, slack-jawed, at the man he had always known as a pillar of society. Inspector Davies, though still reeling, had instinctively straightened, his hand moving towards the handcuffs at his belt. "Yes, Your Grace," Poirot continued, his voice now a quiet, inexorable force. "Sir Alistair, in his boundless loyalty, offered you a path to redemption. He revealed the extent of his findings, laid bare the damning document, and with an act of profound, misplaced trust, showed you where he had concealed it, within his cherished Fabergé Egg. He expected honesty, perhaps remorse, perhaps even a plan for quietly rectifying the wrong." Poirot's voice hardened, tinged with a deep sadness. But what he received instead was the cold, brutal hand of self-preservation. You saw not a friend offering a chance, but a threat. You saw not a path to honesty, but the complete ruin of your life, your reputation, your very freedom. He paused, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle. Hastings could feel the collective intake of breath in the room. The truth, now laid bare, was far uglier than any imagined robbery. "In that study," Poirot narrated, his words painting a chilling picture, "alone with your old friend, the man who had extended to you the highest degree of trust, you succumbed to a desperate, unthinking impulse. The document, the proof of your corruption, lay before you. The weight of your impending exposure, the collapse of your entire world, overwhelmed you. It was not planned, no, it was a sudden, violent reaction of a cornered man." Poirot pointed towards Sir Alistair's desk, now cleared, but still holding the ghosts of the fatal encounter. "Your gaze, Your Grace, must have fallen upon the bronze paperweight, a simple, heavy object, and in a moment of sheer, blind panic, you snatched it. You struck Sir Alistair Finch, one blow, a desperate, instinctive act to silence the truth forever, and with it, the man who held it." The Duke flinched as if physically struck by Poirot's words, his eyes darting to the floor. "Once Sir Alistair lay dead," Poirot continued, his voice unwavering, "your single, frantic thought was the document. You knew it was in the egg. You seized the Fabergé egg from the desk where Sir Alistair had so trustingly placed it. In your desperate haste, your fingers fumbled with the delicate mechanism of the music box, forcing open the hidden compartment. You retrieved the damning evidence, leaving behind a crucial, almost invisible trace." Poirot then walked towards the small table where the Fabergé egg, now retrieved and meticulously examined, rested under a protective cloth. He carefully lifted the cloth, revealing the exquisite piece. "Observe, Inspector, mesdames, messieurs," Poirot commanded, his voice gaining its full oratorical power. "The exterior of this masterpiece is pristine, but upon the internal mechanism of the music box, here," he pointed with a gloved finger to the minute scratch he had discovered, "there is a microscopic scratch, a mark of hurried, forceful manipulation from within. Not the gentle, knowing touch of Sir Alistair, but the clumsy, desperate fumbling of a man in a panic, tearing open the only key to his salvation. He then looked directly at the Duke, and then the egg itself became a problem. Too identifiable to take, too dangerous to leave obviously at the scene, so you sought a hiding place, somewhere mundane, somewhere overlooked, to create the illusion of an outside robbery. An antechamber display case, perhaps, a simple yet effective diversion. And finally, Poirot went on, delivering the final crushing blow, the unique scent, the faint yet unmistakable chemical aroma I detected in Sir Alistair's study. A scent, Your Grace, that derives from specialized inks and treatments used exclusively on high-security government documents, documents which, as a distinguished Member of Parliament, you handle on a daily basis. It was your chemical fingerprint, Your Grace, left unwittingly on the scene of the crime. Hastings watched the Duke, mesmerized. The defiance had drained from his face, replaced by a terrible, empty despair. The raw, irrefutable chain of evidence, the precise motive, the desperate, impulsive blow, the telltale scratch on the egg, the unique chemical scent, and the profound betrayal of a lifelong friendship. Each link, forged in Poirot's relentless logic, now bound the Duke beyond escape. The Duke of Ashworth's shoulders slumped, his face, once proud and composed, crumpled. He looked utterly broken, defeated. A ragged, choking sound escaped his throat. He covered his face with his hands, his body beginning to tremble violently.
He knew, the Duke choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears and a terrible raw agony. He knew everything. I begged him. I tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't let it go. My life, everything. I couldn't let it come out. It was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him. Oh, Alistair, my friend. The confession, raw and painful, hung in the silent air. The mask had shattered completely. Inspector Davies, stunned by the sheer magnitude of the truth, stepped forward, his expression grave.
Chapter 5. Uncomfortable Truths. The Duke of Ashworth's confession hung heavy in the air, a devastating silence filling the drawing-room. Inspector Davies, though still visibly shaken by the revelation of such high-level corruption and the brutal murder committed by a man of the Duke's standing, found his voice. "Duke of Ashworth," he stated, his voice firm, "I am arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Sir Alistair Finch. You are not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you say will be taken down in writing and may be given in evidence."
As the constables moved forward to take the Duke into custody, a wave of stunned disbelief rippled through the onlookers. Lady Eleanor let out a sob, while Reggie could only stare, his face a mask of horrified comprehension. Madame Dubois averted her gaze, and Mr. Blackwood simply tightened his jaw. The sheer magnitude of the scandal, involving a prominent member of Parliament, was already beginning to radiate through the quiet manor, promising to send shockwaves through the highest echelons of British society.
Hastings, witnessing the dramatic scene, turned to Poirot, his voice low. "Good heavens, Poirot, it's almost too much to take in." The Duke, of all people. Poirot merely nodded, his expression solemn. The truth, Hastings, often carries the most uncomfortable burden. Justice, however, must always find its way. In the days that followed, Finch Manor became a hub of police activity, then slowly, painstakingly, returned to a semblance of its former quietude. Lady Eleanor, though utterly devastated by her husband's death and the crushing betrayal of a lifelong friend, found a grim satisfaction in the truth. Sir Alistair's meticulous pursuit of justice, though it cost him his life, had been vindicated. She resolved to ensure his legacy was one of integrity, not just as a collector, but as a man who sought out uncomfortable truths, ensuring his passion for exposing wrongdoing would not be in vain. Reggie, her son, initially preoccupied with the inheritance, was profoundly affected by the scandal, realizing the true cost of his father's integrity. While still struggling with his own financial affairs, he vowed to treat the remaining collection with a newfound respect, recognizing its symbolic value beyond mere monetary worth. The Fabergé Egg, though briefly gone, was returned to a place of honor, albeit now with a silent, sombre history etched into its beautiful facade. Plans were quietly set in motion to donate significant parts of the collection to national museums, fulfilling a long-held, if unspoken, desire of Sir Alistair to share his treasures with the public. A damning document retrieved by Poirot from its hidden compartment was immediately handed over to the authorities. Its contents, now irrefutable, promised seismic shifts within the government. Investigations were launched, leading to swift resignations, arrests, and potential large-scale reforms aimed at rooting out the corruption Sir Alistair had so bravely uncovered. Sir Alistair's final act, unknowingly, had set in motion a profound cleansing, a testament to one man's unwavering commitment to the public good, even at the ultimate personal cost. Days later, with the last vestiges of winter snow beginning to melt from the Kentish hills, giving way to the first timid shoots of crocus and daffodil, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to leave Finch Manor. The air, though still crisp, carried the faint promise of spring, a symbolic renewal after the dark events. "A sad business, Poirot," Hastings remarked, as their bags were loaded into the motor car by a quiet, subdued staff. "Such a brilliant man, Sir Alistair, undone by the very trust he placed in a friend. It's a sobering thought." Poirot gazed back at the stately manor, now a silent monument to a dark secret brought decisively to light. "Indeed, Hastings, it is a testament to the intricate interplay of human nature. Greed, fear, trust, betrayal. They are threads in a tapestry, sometimes creating beauty, sometimes a terrible knot of deceit and sorrow. But the truth, however elusive, always leaves its signature, waiting for the right eye to discern it." He adjusted his scarf, a familiar glint in his eye, and straightened his hat. "The manor, it breathes easier now, yes? The dark secrets, they are expelled, and the order, the equilibrium, is restored." With a final, philosophical sigh, Poirot settled into the comfortable leather seats of the car. The engine purred to life. The case of the vanished valuables was closed, its unsettling truths revealed, its justice administered. London awaited, and with it, no doubt, Poirot's next challenge to order, to the tidy resolution of human folly and crime.